Hello YouTube. So Baizhu has been out for a bit of time now. I have been doing some theory crafting regarding how good he is for Cyno. And to answer that question, he is absolutely incredible for Cyno. He's not a huge ceiling raiser for Cyno. The thing is, Cyno wasn't in need of a big ceiling raiser to begin with. He already has a very high ceiling. What he needed was improvements to his practicality, and in that regard, Baizhu is a monumental improvement for Cyno. Now, there are three main reasons why Baizhu is so massive for Cyno's practicality, and I'm going to be explaining all three of these reasons, and providing some math to go alongside it. So, with all that said, let's jump right into this. Okay, so the first benefit Baizhu is bringing to the table for Cyno is fixing his issues in multi-wave. As we all know, Cyno is known for being held back in multi-wave content, since Nahida's elemental skill marks enemies. You have to swap it back too hard and mark a new wave of enemies. But if you swap off of Cyno early, you lose his burst. So you would have to choose between swapping early and losing your burst, or staying on Cyno without any danger application, which would lead to him dealing very low damage, since he is heavily reliant on elemental reactions to deal high damage. The way Baizhu solves this is by being a secondary source of off-field danger application. So even if a new wave of enemies spawn, he allows you to stay on Cyno without losing all of his damage. You will lose Nahida's damage and application, but you do still keep the 250 EM buff from her burst. This is a bit of a difficult thing to calculate, but my friend Pras has done some math on it, and compared to having no more danger application in multi-wave, to now having Baizhu's application still in multi-wave. Previously, Cyno would lose up to about 50% of his damage during that time, whereas with Baizhu, it goes all the way down to only losing about 7 to 10% of his damage. That is an absolutely massive difference. Now, we did have ways to mitigate this before, such as running Kuki as the fourth unit, or playing Chaos Cyno. Kuki mitigated the issue because with her particle generation plus electro resonance, you are able to stop off Cyno early and not run into severe energy issues. And she is also able to Hyper Bloom in his downtime, so if you do swap off him early, you still have a good source of damage during that time. And Chaos Cyno mitigates this multi-wave issue by having Yelan able to forward vaporize, and Thoma able to barge in to take out a wave of enemies before Cyno takes the field, or during any downtime he may have. Both of these are effective ways of dealing with multi-wave, but they both have some flaws which Baizhu does not have. With Kuki, the main flaw is that you have no source of interruption resistance unless you are using Sync Show as the Hydro, which he is great, but he does result in less damage than Yelan still. With Chaos, how effective this team is at dealing with multi-wave depends a lot on how strong your Yelan is. The team can also have survivability issues since there are Barchins and only Thoma as a defensive slot, while wanting to earn a good amount of elemental mastery on him. But with Baizhu, he is continuously generating a shield, so you do not have the interruption issue that you do with Kuki. And since he heals, you do not have the survivability concerns that Chaos has, while not being reliant on having a super strong Yelan to take out waves for Cyno. Now, the second big thing with Baizhu is how he is a literal direct upgrade in one of Cyno's strongest teams, in literally every possible way. So, if you weren't aware, before Baizhu, one of Cyno's arguably strongest teams was Cyno, Nahida, Yao Yao, Yelan. Double Dendro is excellent with Cyno because the Resonance is a really good buff that you get full uptime on, and because having two Dendro units results in higher quick and uptime. Now, while this team was very strong, it had several practicality issues. There was the multi-wave issue, which we already discussed. Yao Yao was not very good at solving this due to her low uptime and unreliable application when you have enemies spawning or moving away from her rapid. There is also the issue of the team not having any form of interruption resistance unless using Sync Show instead of Yelan. Baizhu does not have any of these issues. We already explained why he is great for multi-wave. This Dendro application is also not circle impact like Yao Yao's, restricting you to a set area. So even if enemies spawn a good distance away, you are still perfectly fine with Baizhu. Another practical issue the team had with Yao Yao is that if you needed to heal the entire team, you would have to use Yao Yao's burst and extend her fill time, resulting in an extended rotation with lower DPS. Baizhu heals the entire team just by casting his skill, which is already an implemented part of the rotation, so he doesn't have to extend the rotation to do this. And even if we ignore all these practical issues the team had with Yao Yao, Baizhu is still a direct upgrade over her offensively as well. So, take a look at these calcs I have done for the team with Baizhu compared to with Yao Yao. The team deals more damage and DPS with Baizhu, even though the rotation is a bit longer. This is mainly because he provides a really solid buff that lasts Cyno's entire fill time. Baizhu's buff is known for being pretty small. That is true if you are only getting the Quicken buff or the Hyper Bloom buff, but Cyno is unique in that you actually get to utilize both of these buffs at the same time. This results in Baizhu's buff increasing Cyno's damage by about 8%, which is a very solid buff for a shielder or healer to provide. Compare this to Yao Yao, and she doesn't actually have any of her own offensive utility at all for this team. Now, you might look at these numbers and think that the DPS increase of Baizhu over Yao Yao is very small, and you would be correct. However, take a look at the total damage per rotation. The team is doing about 100,000 more damage per rotation with Baizhu than Yao Yao. So that means the reason why the DPS is so close with Yao Yao is because the rotation is shorter with her. However, Yao Yao's fill time can sometimes, not always, but sometimes, be longer than what I have for this calc. For example, she will usually want to use Favonius due to not having any better options to support the team, but you might not always proc it within just a couple of normal attacks and radish hits, causing you to need to stay on her for a little longer to proc the Favonius. That, and there are the times where you need to use her burst to heal, which, as mentioned earlier, will extend her fill time. If we were to assume that she takes, say, an extra second of fill time, the DPS of her team goes down to 63k, making a bit bigger of a gap between Baizhu and her. This is, of course, still very good DPS. However, it shows us that Baizhu is a bit better than Yao Yao on paper, while also being significantly better than her practically due to all of the things mentioned here that don't reflect on the sheet, such as poise and multi-wave, thus making him overall an extremely significant upgrade over her, in what can be argued to be Cyno's strongest team. And the third point I want to bring up is that Baizhu makes Cyno much less reliant on Nahida. You do still want to be using Nahida with Cyno, but if you either don't have her or want to use Nahida elsewhere, Baizhu allows you to do so. For example, in the double Dendro team, you can use Dendro Traveler instead of Nahida. According to my calcs, this is about 14% behind Nahida, which is a pretty significant difference, but it does at least have better multi-wave than Nahida. You can even use Aggravate Cyno with Baizhu and not need Nahida with a team like Cyno, Baizhu, Faishal, and Kazuha or Sucrose. With Baizhu as your Dendro, you can very easily have a Nemo absorb and swirl Electro, which can be difficult and annoying to do with Nahida. And since Baizhu is a catalyst, he can wield Thrilling Tales, and Faishal can snapshot it on both the odds critic from her skill and burst. Although in a single Dendro team, you might not be able to use Thrilling Tales because you might need to use Favonius on him due to energy issues. Though I do want to make it clear that I still absolutely do not advise Aggravate Cyno over Quick Bloom, but playing it this way makes the team feel so much better, while also freeing up Nahida and not having any multi-wave issues as a result of not using her. But yeah, those are the three main things that are making Baizhu an absolutely amazing unit for Cyno. Overall, I think that Baizhu might be the second most important unit to pull for Cyno, right behind Nahida. He's an improvement to Cyno theoretically, and a significant improvement practically, which is the number one thing that Cyno needed. As for how good Baizhu is in general, not just in Cyno teams, I have a video I am working on regarding that, but I will tell you that he's an absolutely amazing unit. But yeah, thanks for watching. Bye.